Peter Garrett, welcome to News 24.
Thanks.
The Gonski report makes it clear that the performance of Australian students on international comparisons has slipped in the last decade, is at risk at slipping further. Australians on the list of other OECD countries on school spending really is in about the middle of that list, and more students in later years of schooling are not reaching minimum standards. The report says that a change in funding is urgent. Do you believe the steps you've outlined to make the change is urgent enough?
Yes, I do. I think that we are absolutely serious about going to the next step in terms of wanting to make sure that every school in Australia is a great school for kids, regardless of where that school is, regardless of how much money their parents earn. And you're right, Mr Gonski's panel does identify something which should concern Australians. We've got a good education system and we've certainly got good results, but we are slipping comparatively against, say, equivalent countries overseas. And we now have 4 out of 5 of the top performing education countries in our region. There's one other thing here, Lyndall, and that is this. Mr Gonski also identifies what is a big pack of disadvantaged schools and kids who are not able to reach their full achievement levels. And that is something as a country we need to address. It's not acceptable for a kid from a disadvantaged area to be 3 years behind a similar kid from an advantaged area in terms of their education.
But the Prime Minister has described the model outlined, the schooling resource standard outlined in the Gonski report as an insight. You're not committed to spending the sorts of money that the Gonski report recommended. He said on the schooling resource standard in 2009 you'd need an extra $5 billion. Are you really committed to making the sorts of changes that this report has recommended, or are you adopting a wait-and-see approach?
Oh no, we're rolling up our sleeves and getting stuck into it. In fact, Senior Officials Working Group meet this Wednesday, but more importantly, we've already nearly doubled the spending on education compared to the previous government. We've also brought through some important national reforms. So look at the national curriculum, something people said would never happen in Australia. My school, national teacher standards as well. These have all required the Commonwealth to agree the states on the national steps we want to take on improving education for kids. I'm confident that we can take the states on that journey with us of collaboration. They're letting us know that they want to do it, and that's a good thing.
In a country the size of Australia, can we really afford to have still two levels of government funding schools? Wouldn't it be better to have one level funding, another level running schools, particularly government schools?
Well, I think the panel's recommendations and certainly the government's response acknowledges that the states do run those government school systems. They will continue to do that. They do it well. But it is true that we need to have a national framework which identifies the best ways in which governments, plural, can fund school systems, plural. I mean, we've got a diverse schooling system now in this country. We need to recognise that, and we also need to recognise that if we're going to address disadvantage, we have to be very clear about the direction for funding in the future. And that's what's so important about today. I mean, we haven't looked at this issue properly for nearly 40 years. Today, we have an opportunity to take that next big step. And it's important for us in the Asian century. It's important that our kids have got the kind of education they need so that we can be competitive and successful as a country in the future.
The Prime Minister said today that she regards it as a citizenship entitlement, that governments help pay for students' schooling. But aren't there some schools in Australia, the very richest schools, where parents can afford to pay and government funding might be needed to help those disadvantaged you've spoken of?
Well, I think one of the important and interesting recommendations about the Gonski panel's work is to look at the way in which things, for example, such as disability loadings, might be applied across school sectors. In other words, non-government schools, including the kind of schools that you're referring to in your question, may have an opportunity to take up the teaching and the care of disabled students as well. The fact is that...
So that means that students who are disadvantaged may have more choices to go to, and that would help break the concentration of disadvantage.
That's absolutely right. Look, the other thing to say is this. We've already identified the fact that we've got investments in national partnerships in teacher quality, very important once a kid gets inside the school gate. On literacy and numeracy, very important as the foundations for all children's learning, and on low SES communities. But that's the sort of funding that we've applied as a government because we really believe in the importance of education. What we now need to do is have a national joining together of the best way to fund schools in the future, which makes sure that any kid, wherever they are, and whatever the status of their parents is, has the opportunity to learn to the best of their ability.
One final question about leadership. You've been reluctant to talk about it. You've expressed your support for the Prime Minister. Do you understand where some of the concern in caucus is coming about both the Prime Minister's performance and the government's performance?
What I would say is this: I think the Prime Minister is doing a very good job in somewhat trying circumstances. I support the Prime Minister. I'll continue to support the Prime Minister. And my message to caucus, as I gave it yesterday, is the same. We have to exercise discipline. We have to focus on the good things that we're doing, and there are many of them, including in education, and get on with the job of being a government.
Aren't those trying circumstances, though, circumstances of your own making? A backflip on the carbon tax, a effective near loss at the last election that's given you a minority government?
Well, look, I don't think any of us are looking backward, Lyndall. I think what we're really focused on is what we can do today and tomorrow about making sure that Australians have got the best possible opportunities to meet the many challenges that come to them. And none is more important than the kind of quality education their kids should be getting, and that's what we're committed to.
Peter Garrett, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having us.